This presentation is going to be sharing information learned at a meeting today that was led by the ESA Finance Manager, Jenny Pragnell, at the Air Force Base that I was in attendance for. She provided a lot of good information that can't be found on the website, so I just wanted to share it all with you here in the same place. Currently, the provider handbook is available on the ESA website. So a couple of things that came up when talking about what is the Wyoming ESA program. So with the allocated amount that you see here, $30 million appropriated for this year, with $7,000 being awarded for each eligible student, that is going to afford a little more than 4,000 students to apply for these funds. In the case of military families, they have two options for residency. So they could be a Wyoming resident but be actively stationed in the military somewhere else. Those children would be eligible. They could also be a resident of another state but stationed in Wyoming. So those are 2 points of clarity that were specific to military families that had not been previously discussed. It was stated that it is required by law that randomly 2% of both ESA fund recipients as well as ESA providers will be audited. The Wyoming Department of Education is also going to create a link for anonymous reporting of misuse, that anybody could say if they are seeing funds being misused. The anticipation is this will not be with the providers, but perhaps but that is not yet available, but that is something that is coming. The eligibility requirements, of course, Wyoming residents age 4 years and in pre-K through grade 5 and not currently enrolled in public school for the 2025-26 school year. It did come up that currently most public schools have already elicited information about enrolling for the upcoming school year. It does not matter if the child is currently registered for the 25-26 school year in a public school, but they would not be able to attend a single day of the next school year. They would have to apply for the ESA funds and apply them starting July 1st to a private school. Also, for residency, a few of you have asked what kind of documentation is going to be needed to prove residency: a mortgage payment, a lease, utility bill. She mentioned 90 days. Again, funds are distributed quarterly, with the first funds being distributed on July 1st, 2025. Again, because this was a military presentation, it did come up that what happens to those funds if a military family moves, right, is transferred. That would be up to the school to notify WDE so that those funds would not be distributed into the student's account. Basically, because you will still be sending tuition statements, you just would not send a tuition statement to a family that has moved, then WDE would not distribute funds for those families. Please note the bottom bullet point here about pre-K. It is only 1 year that funds are available for pre-K, which is why they're using age 4. So several of the schools call it pre-K 4, kinder prep, whatever have you. The funds are only available for the year directly preceding kindergarten because the program is supposed to provide kindergarten readiness. So a couple of updates with the participation requirements. So since the last time this was discussed, it was really just a first come, first serve. They are still going to honor first come, first serve for the 25-26 school year. However, following that, from 2026 and 2027 on, there will be renewal with priority that will go to students that are going to receive funds in 25-26, or that happen to be a sibling of students that received funds in 25-26. So shifting to next year, or subsequent years after this first year, it is called a renewal process with priority. Anybody receiving funds will automatically have a window of time to apply for renewal before it is opened up to new families. Looking at this session here on assessments, WDE is going to provide a document that will list about 20 to 30 different assessment tests that will be accepted as a nationally normed reference assessment. Now, something that came up here that I thought was pretty interesting that some of you may want to consider is those of you that do YTOP or that do MAP testing or iReady or what have you, whatever your assessment is, if you wanted to open up those assessments, so let's say you give MAP 3 times a year. So if you want to publish those testing dates at the beginning of the school year and open that up to homeschool families to come to your school and participate in MAP testing when you're testing the rest of your students, you can charge a fee for that. That will take some of the responsibility off of the parents to find a test for their students. They would be put into a database that would provide the testing, the assessment data that families will need to qualify as homeschool students, but the schools in the diocese could use this as a revenue stream if this was something that you wanted to do. You would be able to charge a fee for those homeschool families to come and be assessed at your school, and then those homeschool families could use the ESA to pay for taking that test. Another thing that came up is, and this is, I think, bears a little more conversation, but it is definitely something worth noting. You can actually charge different tuitions. So let's say, for example, say just for ease of discussion here, that tuition is set at $5,000. And you have a family that says to you they only want to apply $2,000 of the ESA funds towards their tuition. They would then owe you $3,000 and they would be billed separately by the school for the balance of that tuition. So maybe the family wants to use the balance of their ESA funds for outside services of some kind, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But what that would do is if a family elects to do that, your tuition statements may look different by your families. You, of course, as schools and boards, could make the decision to not do that, right? Like you set the policy on this. But if that is something that you are willing to work with families on, you could set your tuition at $5,000, and it's still the family's responsibility to pay that $5,000. So they may want to use all 5 from the ESA funds. They may want to use 2 from ESA funds and be responsible themselves for $3,000. So that's kind of up to each individual school to basically discuss and decide if that is something that you want to permit. So basically what she said is if the parents want to use $2,000 towards tuition, the school would charge that additional tuition outside of the Odyssey platform. Anybody that's using the ESA funds to pay entirely for their tuition, that will all be managed through Odyssey. So this would just be a circumstance where the families elect to use some of those funds elsewhere. You would have to bill them outside of the Odyssey program. All right, this is the page that I have the most notes on. So, one of the things that they were very clear about, you will remember that initially the ESA parent application was to open on January the 1st. Then they altered that a little bit and had a super short phase, what they were calling a phase 1 application that opened January 1st, and then they were going to have a phase 2 that opened later in the spring. Well, they have completely canceled the phase 2. And starting on May the 15th is what they are calling a universal application. She did say that when phase 1 was open, so from January through, I want to say it was mid-February, so far around 700 people have applied for those ESA funds. Those people that filled that out are still going to have some priority on that first come, first serve. So the universal application for families that did not fill out the first phase will become available May 15th. Families that did apply for phase 1 will have access to that application prior to May 15th, but she did not provide a date on that. So currently they are saying the application for families will be available from May 15th to June 25th, unless all 4,200 students, unless all of the money is claimed. So if they get to the point that they have, and I can't remember the exact number, a little more than 4,000 students, if all of the money is gone, they will close the application. So it will be shut down. They also said, though, that if the application is set to close June 25th, if seats remain, they will have a period of time where they reopen the application. So they're basically doing this, they'll have applications open basically until the money is gone. So again, this was very much a military-focused presentation, and there was some concern about, well, what about families that transfer in the middle of the year? They obviously would have missed that May 15th to June 25th window. What about them? Again, as long as money is available, so as long as all of the funds haven't been given out, military families will be able to apply for the funds if they transfer in. And that's only if they transfer in. It cannot be somebody that starts the year in Wyoming and in January decides, oh man, I should have done that. That won't be available to them. Just families that moved in. You see here they're talking about on this slide about a marketplace. She referenced this marketplace as being similar to an Amazon setup. So if you have 2 children that are receiving ESA funds, and again, your school only charges $5,000 in tuition, you also have $2,000 available for your student to use on a variety of educational services. Maybe they take speech outside of school. Maybe they get OT or PT, or they have a behavioral therapist. There's a ton of products that you could use that balance of $2,000 on. It could be used towards tuition. It could be used for a whole bunch of things. Families are going to start by going to this marketplace. And again, if they have 2 children, there will be like a cart for each child. So if they want, child 1 to get speech therapy and child 2 to get mental health therapy, that's okay. They would choose from the providers on the marketplace. Well, let's say they have a family provider that has been providing these services for them for years, and they don't want to pick somebody that's on the marketplace. WDE won't necessarily say no, but it will be a much longer process. Families would have to pay out of pocket to that therapist and then apply for reimbursement, and then that would get that money back. So that's the only circumstance where money would ever fall into the hands of a parent, is if they have to apply for reimbursement for some service that is not listed on the marketplace. Basically, what she said is, because the company Odyssey has been doing this in states for, I want to say 10 to 15 years, they're basically pulling over their entire platform for marketplace. So anything that's national has already been vetted by Odyssey and is already going to be on the marketplace. again, going back to therapists, if a student or a family has been working with a therapist that is not on the provider list, those families should encourage providers to become accepted as an ESP. Let's see. What else do I have here? Yeah, okay. So I think that is it for this page. All right, moving on. So this primarily deals with homeschool families, but as these opportunities open up, you may be starting to have more interactions with homeschool families for a number of different, initiatives. One thing that is worth noting, in case you are having conversations with homeschool families, if a homeschool family chooses to purchase a laptop or a tablet by using their ESA funds, that becomes the personal property then of that student. So a lot of times when government funds are used, it's up to the school to offer those items back to, generally the public school, but offer those items back. That is not the case here. Those items will not be returned, so families or students can keep them. And again, they kept referring to things like tablets, iPads, that kind of thing. Something that they are looking into, again, specifically for homeschool families, is if internet can be reimbursed for, and that is something that they are considering. So the ESA year is July 1st to June 30th. Again, money's not available till July 1st. A lot of this information that I'm sharing with you here will be available in a family handbook. They are anticipating that family handbook to be ready by mid-April, and it will be housed on the ESA website. So determining if an item is a qualified expense, this speaks basically to if something will be reimbursed. So she said the first two questions are the most important. Is the expense statutorily allowable? And again, they have a list, right? Does it fit into an allowed category? And is the request reasonable and ordinarily used in an educational context? One thing that she did state is if the family says no to question 2, that does not necessarily mean that it won't get approved. And the example she used was the purchase of a hammer, right? You wouldn't generally think of a hammer as being used in an educational context. So what that parent might be asked to do is to provide the scenario in which their student's going to use a hammer. And in this case, it might be if they were doing, some kind of woodworking, some kind of project-based learning where the use of a hammer to construct something is part of the process. Okay, so that's that. All right. One thing that she did say is that specifically looking at bullet point number 3 under the first bullet, specialized service providers, again, that's occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, mental health counseling, a whole plethora of those that families can have access to. If their health insurance doesn't cover, then these funds could be used. The third bullet point may not be a family member to receive ESA funds for services. Somebody specifically asked about a student of a faculty member or a principal, and that is not what this is speaking of. Those students would absolutely be eligible for ESA funds. They're talking about if, say, for example, I'm a homeschool family and I want to pay my sister to be a tutor, that would not be approved. But students of faculty members are eligible. All right, so the service provider certification process. It is actually a one and done certification. So those applications that schools are currently in the process of or have recently submitted, that's the last time you will have to do that. The good news is for this first year, everybody is going to be automatically approved. So you don't have to sit on pins and needles wondering if that application that you just submitted will be approved, because this first year they will be automatically approved. Much like our WCEA accreditation being a provisional accreditation, that's what this is. You are provisionally going to be approved this year, and then at some point during the first year, somebody from the Wyoming Department of Education will touch base with the schools, ask any questions that they may have, but once you are certified as an ESP, that is true in perpetuity. All right, account renewal process. So this is interesting, the third bullet point here. Any unused funds in a student's ESA will roll over into the next year with continued participation in the ESA program. That is virtually unheard of. I have never seen a yearly account that is allowed to roll over and accrue. There is currently no cap on the funds that can be accrued. So let's say, again, your tuition is $5,000. Every family does get $7,000. So I did specifically ask the question, well, what if I go into my application and say, I only want $2,000? Doesn't matter. Everybody that is approved to receive these funds automatically has $7,000 earmarked to them. But let's say that tuition was only $3,000 this year, and I didn't use the extra $4,000 for any additional services. So now in 26-27, my student will get $7,000 again and maintain that $4,000 in their account. So that student now has $11,000. At the elementary level, this isn't particularly significant. Where I see this becoming significant is as the students end up going on to the high school. These funds can be used to pay for AP tests. AP tests are about $100 a test. There are some high school students that take 5, 6, 7 of these. So ESA funds can be used to pay for those. That is, well, of course, contingent about not being enrolled in a public school. So we're going to have to kind of see where this goes with our private school options for secondary schools here in the next, 5 to 10 years. So that I thought was extremely interesting. Here again is the contact information and the website for the ESA program. She was very clear to say that you will very frequently hear an interchange or interchangeably using Steamboat Legacy Scholarship Act with ESA. They basically, and the bill makes reference to both names as well. They're using ESA primarily because they had a nine-month jumpstart using ESA and have a bunch of materials and what have you created. So we can use Steamboat Legacy Scholarship Act in exchange for ESA or vice versa. So I hope this was helpful. If anything else, if this sparked any additional questions, I did open up a streamlined communication with Jenny. She was super helpful today, so I have a direct line to her to get those questions answered. What I would ask is if you have questions, if you would please post those questions in Basecamp. That has been an invaluable place to gather and collect a bunch of materials regarding this new legislation, and the more we share with each other, kind of the better off we'll be in the long run. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have additional questions or if this sparked additional questions, and I will do my best to get them answered for you. Thanks so much, and have a great day.